And we are live, Senators.
Okay, do we have the folks with us this morning? Good morning, everybody. Thursday, February 17th. And this is the Senate Transportation Committee. And our first item on the agenda this morning is Aviation Hangar Master Permitting Project. We have Dan Labiere with us from the Agency of Transportation and Steve Ireland, I believe it is, Project Manager. So our fellow two gentlemen are with us this morning.
Yes. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning. Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
Great. Doing great.
Good. Okay, go ahead. It's all yours.
Okay, Dan Delabriere. I'm the Rail and Aviation Bureau Director for Vtrans. I have with me Steve Ireland from McFarland Johnson. He is the project manager working for Vtrans, putting this project together. We thought we'd give you a little update on what came about 2 years ago, Bill S-162. Bill 162, basically, I'll give you just the high level version, was sort of an economic development bill. Agency of Commerce Community Development was charged with attracting additional private business into Vermont, recruiting new business, attracting more innovative and entrepreneurial businesses into Vermont, and growing workforce. So one of the challenges that ACCD identified in their research was, our state airports seem to be sort of underutilized. And one of the reasons why businesses were identifying that they weren't coming to Vermont and using our airports was that it took too long to get a permit to build a building, or anything that they would need, like any extra space, parking, anything like that. So the biggest or the first thing that they would need, and of course in Vermont, right, we have weather, right? So I mean, obviously, if you're going to do a business on an airport, you're going to need a building because you can't work outside in January, February, March, whatever. So hangar space was identified as a real need. At the same time, there's a big push for this aerospace corridor between Montreal and, say, Washington, D.C. There's this big aerospace corridor down the East Coast. So we kind of lined right up with this initiative that the aerospace industry is kind of looking to expand. So with that, ACCD teamed up here with Vtrans, and we said, all right, we'll take a look at our airports and see what we can do to make it easier for businesses to come and use our airports. So with that, we said, well, all right, we'll do some pre-permitting of hangars. Hangar space seems to be the need. So, Alex, do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, you do.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. We put together just a real quick version of what we're working on here. Can people see that?
Not yet. Not yet. Okay, got it.
Okay, so this is kind of what we're working on. And again, it's been since 2019. So the state owns 10 state airports, but we didn't include Island Pond because it's a small little grass strip airport. So we have 9 sort of GA airports, and they're listed in the order of kind of which one is the furthest along in the permitting process. So we're closest to get our permits at Northeast Kingdom, and then Franklin and Middlebury and so forth. So this is kind of the airports we're working on, and then I'll get into each individual airport and show you what we're doing. So kind of what the common theme at each airport is, we decided to go with to get through the permitting process. You have to identify what are you building. Basically give them as much information as possible about what you're building so that they can give you a permit. So we had to identify sort of 3 basic sizes. We'd have what we call the large hangar, which is more really sort of more targeted toward businesses, right? So if you wanted to have a business, you'd probably want a 120 by 120 where you could put multiple planes in there, work on them, do whatever you needed to do. You'd probably have some sort of an office in there, so you'd need water and sewer. And then one of the permit questions is how many people actually come and go from that building every day. So we assumed a maximum of 24 people, but the final permit would have to be pulled by the individual anyway, but this would get them like 95% there. So anyway, so we identified at each airport, is there a need for a 120 by 120? Is there a need for medium size hangars, which is an 80 by 60? So that's typically used where it could be a business, but it's typically 80 by 60 medium size is, two guys get together, they both each have a plane or something, they'll team up and say, we'll build a building together and we'll put a couple planes in there. And then we have a small single kind of user 60 by 60 hangar. So we sort of identified the most common, based on what we have around the state, kind of the most common size hangars. So along with that, when you get a permit, you need to, our permit process identifies, what happens if you get this permit. Well, sometimes you need stormwater. Sometimes you're affecting wetlands. Sometimes you're affecting other things. So, you also need to get, how do you get from the ramp or apron? How do you get from there to this space, this hangar space? So we had to identify that, taxiways and things like that. I had to identify stormwater, and then with all that, we got as close to a final permit as we could get. So there'll be most of our findings through Act 250 will be met, but the final permit will have to still go through Act 250, and that's basically like, we identified the hangars have to be earth tone colors. So now they got to go in and say, "Yep, my hangar is going to be tan," and that that's kind of the idea. So. All right, so I kind of went through some of these steps. So it's kind of started with S-162, as I mentioned. We started looking at all the 9 airports and said, well, what are our impacts? Where on our airport do we have, say, wetlands? Where on our airport do we have, say, archaeological areas? Where do we have things like that? And we wanted to sort of avoid those areas and to put hangars where it makes sense. So we kind of did that. We identified spaces where we could put them. We had to design stormwater. Obviously, if it rains on a roof and the water comes down, where's the water go? On the large hangars, there was water and wastewater. We had to design that. Act 250, obviously, we're doing a permit for each airport going through Act 250. Through the Act 250 process, the public is allowed to have input on what we're designing and what we're putting. So there's a couple of places for public input and public notice. Stormwater, we give notice, or through the permit process, there's notice for permit for stormwater design. And then Act 250, there's another public input process through the Act 250. And then the final permitting, so these built, while the state owns the property, they're going to have to get a local building permit for whatever town they're in, so that it goes on the grand list for that town, and the town will generate tax income from those hangars. All right, so looking at each airport, we'll start, like I said, the one that's furthest along is Northeast Kingdom Airport. You can see here, this is I didn't show the whole airport, but this shows, the terminal building is right in here. This is our fuel farm. Our main runway is down here. So what we're talking about is adding 5 small hangars that line up with existing hangars here. We could put a large corporate hangar in yellow. We could put that over in this area. And then there's areas for 3 medium-sized hangars here. Now, I'm showing the hangars, but what I'm not showing here is the final. It would get too. I wouldn't. The visual wouldn't be good on the screen, so I didn't show all the infrastructure. How do you get here? But basically, there'd be a big paved area in here, and then kind of an access over to the ramp that gets there. So basically, what I'm trying to show you is what we're planning at each airport. Now, what does this mean? So it's 1 large, 3 medium, and 5 small. Now, what we've done to date at this airport, so all the permitting and the engineering and design work, we've spent $84,000 just to get us here. So you can see why when these people say, we'd come use your airport and we'd build our business there, but it's too expensive. This is going to help get them there, right? This is going to cut down on their costs. So we're investing, our money, state money, into growing businesses. So the status is the operational stormwater is complete, the wastewater is complete, and our Act 250, the public notice is going out tomorrow.
Who builds the hangars, Dan? Is that the individual builds the hangars, or we build the hangars?
So the idea, Senator, is for us to do sort of all the upfront work, right, as far as permitting goes.
Yeah.
But then we're going to turn it over to, the developer, right? We're going to say, all right, we've set you guys up for success here. Now you take the ball and run with it. So you build the hangar. You're going to own the hangar. We're going to have to work out, the ramp and the taxiway and all that stuff. And there's probably going to be, we haven't determined who's going to pay for that. But the idea here is to set these developers up so that they can succeed and they can get right. So look at what we've done. It's taken us 2 years. If a business had to go through this process and take 2 years, they're not as likely to come to Vermont and put their business here, because that's a long time and a lot of unknowns. So if they kind of had a sure thing ahead of them, all right, we've got a permit almost in hand here, they're going to be more likely to come and invest in our airports.
But they pay us rent. They pay us rent after that every month.
Yeah. So the idea is, obviously the bill was to create economic development across the state, and our infrastructure was underutilized, was kind of what the report said. But hopefully these businesses are on our airport, but some of these might be just where they park their plane, but they might have a business, say, in town or something like that. So yes, we will get rental income from the lease. If they build a hangar, we lease them the area that they use for our hangar, for their hangar, and we get rent from that. We will probably also get additional revenue from fuel sales, because if you're moving planes in and out, they buy fuel at the airports. We have fuel farms there, and we create revenue from fuel sales.
Okay. Once you have the permit in hand, Dan, how long are those permits good for somebody to build on?
Well, that's a really good question, Senator Ingalls. We have been working with Act 250 about that same issue. Now, permits typically, and I'll say that permits typically have a shelf life of 5 to 7 years, and then you have to renew them. We're working on that with them will all these hangars get built all in the same year, or as soon as we say, hey, they're ready to go? Probably not, right? I mean, we have some people that are telling us, yep, hey, if you had it, we'd build it right off. But we've definitely permitted more than we have sort of names on a list, which we don't really have a list, but we have kind of people talking, people saying, yeah, we're interested. But I would say we have we haven't like overbuilt the airport. Like we have more space at every airport to put more hangars than we've permitted here. But we also didn't want to go, and I'll exaggerate to make my point. If we put 50 hangars at every airport, we're not gonna in the next 15 years, we're not gonna have a demand for, 15, 20, 30 hangars. We're just not. So we've taken our best guess at future demand. We think that the permit shelf life of 5 to 7 years can be extended if we don't build all those out in the next 5 to 7 years. So we have talked to the permit folks about this, and they understand what we're trying to do. So.
And I don't want to get in the weeds of it, because you've got a great presentation going here, but off the top of your head, do you know what a lease would look like as far as money wise? And if you don't worry about it. We'll move on.
I don't have that information in front of me, Senator Ingalls, but I can get it to you.
Okay, that'd be perfectly fine.
Okay. All right, moving over to Franklin County, we've got a couple different locations. Kind of on the north end, there's a couple spaces that line up with existing hangars. We can put a couple of small hangars there, according to our permit stuff. And on the south end, we can put, kind of 4 more small hangars and 3 medium-sized hangars. And as I presented in my budget presentation, our next project is going to extend this runway on this end. So it'll kind of line up with, what we have going on for our future expansion of this runway. And, so this is kind of what we permitted here, or trying to permit here. So 3 mediums, 6 smalls. We've spent $120,000 here just getting design and permitting to this point. Our operational stormwater is complete. We don't need water and sewer because there's no large corporate hangar here. And we are about to submit the A&R permit, Act 250 permit to A&R. So down in Middlebury, we did an expansion to this airport about 4 or 5 years ago, where we extended the runway about 1,000 feet here. So this airport, again, the main runway area was expanded in anticipation of hopefully more users. But as you can see in this area right here, there's a lot of airplanes that are out and exposed right now. And what we're hearing is we'd have more people come to this airport if they had places to put the airplane inside, and then some of these folks would want to put them inside too. So there's a combination of kind of 2 things going on here. There's kind of 5 small hangars, 3 medium, and a large corporate hangar. And what you don't see here as part of the infrastructure is there's kind of a road back here. This road would be expanded a little bit to get to the corporate hangar. Water and sewer would kind of follow down that road and power to these hangars. So in other words, users wouldn't have to come out onto the airfield and get to their hangar. They could come kind of through the backside and get there without getting onto the into the usable aircraft space. So to date, see 1 large hangar, 3 medium, 5 small. To date, we've up to 167,000. That number seems a little high. We had a design. The reason for that one is we had a design going. The water and sewer location where it was coming in, on the initial design, we thought it was okay, but after we got into the design a little further, we figured out there was a sensitive area. We actually had to redesign where water and sewer was going. We had to kind of start over there. To date, operational stormwater is complete, water's complete, wastewater's in review. As I said, we had a problem with that, but it's in review now. Act 250 preliminary review. So we're moving along in Middlebury. Morrisville, Morrisville's tough. We don't have a ton of land in Morrisville. This airport is fairly constricted as far as land that we own, but we think we can tuck a couple more medium-sized hangars in this corner along Route 100 and access it in between these hangars where people are already accessing these other hangars and come around. So just a couple of medium-sized hangars here. We've got $40,000 into our design so far. Operational stormwater is complete. We don't need water and wastewater. And Act 250, we're in the process of putting that application together. Down in Bennington, we did a reconstruction of this runway a couple of years ago as well. So this airport is seeing a little additional traffic. We have room for 6 medium, a small, and a large corporate hangar. Now, we did it this way on purpose, where if people wanted to do, it's easy, I'll put it this way, it's easier to permit the bigger building and then go to smaller because you're using less footprint than it is to go the other way. So we decided to go 6 medium as opposed to lining up a bunch of smalls here, just because it's easier to adjust or amend a permit later in case the demand goes to small. we thought it would be easier to do it this way. So anyways, we're doing it as 6 medium, 1 small, and 1 large. Whoops, not too far. 1 large, 6 medium, and 1 small. We had some stormwater design that we had to do here, which cost us a bit of time, but we spent $102,000 at that airport. Our stormwater is complete. Water and wastewater is in design right now for the corporate hangar. And we're going to, as soon as we get our water, wastewater, then we'll be able to do our Act 250 application in Bennington. We're getting short on time, so I'll cruise right through. Caledonia, we've got 3 mediums and a small. There's no large. So to date, we've spent $36,000 for that. We're in design on operational stormwater, and no wastewater or water design there. And then as soon as we get done the operational stormwater, we'll apply for Act 250. In Rutland, which is our sort of our larger commercial airport, we're designing for 3 large, 3 small, and 3 medium. I'm sorry, not 3. I'm sorry. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 small. Sorry, I didn't even count. To date, in Rutland, we've spent $91,000. Oh, the other thing to mention is when we permitted this, we're building a new snow removal equipment building to fit our large piece of equipment in, which is just up out of the picture. But as we went through the permit process, we permitted the snow removal equipment building in with this. So 3 large, 3 medium, 4 small, and $91,000. Stormwater's in design, wastewater's in design, and then once we get through those, we'll apply for Act 250. In Berlin at our Knapp Airport, where we're seeing demand for our more commercial traffic, we have 3 large and 2 small and a medium, and $54,000 so far. And we're in design still on stormwater and wastewater. Down in Springfield, we already have, through a different project, we permitted 3 small hangars already. So those we've already done. So again, we have limited land space here as well. We have some more land, but to get it, to use it, would take some pretty large infrastructure expansion to get over it into here. So we thought because we already had 3 existing, we thought we would do a commercial or large hangar. So 1 large is all we're permitting now, and operational stormwater's in design, wastewater's in design. We spent $52,000. So in summary, just trying to hit my timeline here. All airports, we did a snow removal equipment building, 10 large hangars, 25 medium hangars, 23 small, and to date we spent $754,000 on all 9 airports.
If that would come to be true, would we be better financially if we get near a break-even point, if this was all built out and we rented them? And how does that, I mean, that's probably another discussion another day, but
Right. Well, so I would think that the more obviously the intent is the more use you get, the more income you generate. And obviously a lot of this that we're doing was based on the, the bill S-162, which wasn't specifically an airport bill. It was using state infrastructure to meet the need of attracting more businesses. The aerospace corridor, which was showing a need in Vermont. It kind of all lined up so that we're kind of using our infrastructure that we own to generate business all through Vermont, not just at the airport. But to answer your question, if we did build all that out, there's no question we would generate more income at these airports. Would it break even? I don't know the answer to that, Senator, but it would certainly, that infrastructure is meant to be used by the public, and so that's our charge, right? That's what we're supposed to do.
Okay, Senator Ingalls.
I just think it's just smart I just, when people look at state government, they are always, looking for government to be asking them for the money. And in this case right here, it's forward thinking. Watching a presentation that we watched last week that Senator Chittenden had the folks come in from Beta, and to see the excitement that something like that caused, I just think it's smart. I'm glad we're doing it for $500,000, which is nothing in today's world, to be looking forward with that. I applaud you, Dan. It's for me, it's a great job. It's smart. And we have these vast infrastructures, 10 of them throughout the state, really 9 of them or have you. And I applaud what you're doing.
Would you keep your plane there, Senator Ingalls? Or?
I will. I got to put some floats on it.
Any questions, Senator Chittenden?
Dan, I saw $750,000 in permitting and design. What came up last session, and I'd love to hear any just general thoughts you have. When it comes to public dollars and Act 250, an argument's been made that maybe we shouldn't be treating it the same way as private dollars because the public monies are overseen by elected officials, so the public interest is paramount or is top of mind as we're investing these dollars. Of that $750,000, do you have a rough approximate percentage of costs you would associate with Act 250 processes that maybe were not redundant or unnecessary, but could be reformed or revised? Any commentary on how Act 250 is extending the cost to the state of getting these processes through using public dollars for these types of infrastructure investments?
Well, I mean, a lot of those costs are related to our permitting and Act 250. I mean, we have to do a lot of design work to sort of solidify or answer questions like wetland buffers and things like that, that A&R and Act 250 make us go through those processes, which we kind of already know the answer. I mean, it's you can kind of go out and you can kind of see where wetlands are and where they aren't, but we have to actually go out and do a lot of design and borings and all these things that they make us do. That's expensive. And then we have to pay for permits. And sometimes we have to pay for mitigation. Like, we've got airports that have been airports for 70, 80, 90 years. And in some cases, we're still paying ag mitigation fees on state airport land where, yeah, maybe it looks like a place to, ag, but it hasn't been used for ag for 50, 60, 70 years, right? So yeah, we mow it because we have to mow it because airplanes can't land or you get a safety area and you got to keep it mowed. But my point is that we do spend a lot of money in design and Act 250, and to answer your question, we spend a ton of money. I don't know what the percentage, honestly, to get specific, I don't know the percentage of design and permit fees broken out in what I just presented. I could probably figure that out, but there's not just permit fees you have to look at. There's sort of the ancillary borings and buffers and all this research that you have to do to answer a lot of these permit questions.
Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
I do have a comment, because inherent in that is really a policy tension, and that is the extent to which the state is subject to the same requirements to environmental considerations as any other entity. But the other thing that adds cost, and we saw it with some of the highway projects, is when you're dealing with appeals. And I think that's certainly a very significant issue because everyone wants to have that due process protection. But we've obviously seen where that due process has resulted in very prolonged litigation and appeal upon appeal. And that's, to me, that's one of the things. We have Act 250 that, to a large extent, most of the permits move fairly quickly, but the ones that really are contentious and take so much time around those where there is an adjacent property owner or whatever who is appealing. And at some point, I don't know, Route 2, I think we were almost 20 years on that one with the mitigation. But you can see where you're going to get arguments on both sides around the state. And if the state was moving forward in ways that is inconsistent with other policy objectives, it's really a complicated area. And I know that it does frustrate people. There's no question about it. But I think it would be hard to figure out. Now, I think there is move to say we don't want to do redundant. And if there's a way that, in fact, there's already a way of assuring that these conditions are met, should we, look at where that redundancy exists and sort of streamline it? And I think that's another discussion that needs to be had. And I think it is happening, particularly around housing and natural resources.
Okay, any other questions, comments from anybody? Steve Ireland, are you with us this morning? Any comments you'd like to add at this point?
I think Dan did a wonderful job of explaining everything. He's up to date and did an excellent job. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yep. Anybody else in the committee or?
So to give credit, Steve is the one that put that presentation together, by the way. That wasn't me. So.
Okay. Well, you work well together. That's good. Jane, you had something else?
Well, I think Andy's got his hand up.
Okay, I can't see him. All right, go ahead, Andy. I'm sorry.
Well, I'll just give my regular pitch to for any of these hangars that are heated, that you use local wood heating to heat them. A lot of these airports are located in areas where we have a struggling wood products industry. So I think it makes sense for the state to put in wood heating in these areas where it makes sense. We did a study a few years ago that looked at all the airports of the existing hangars, but not obviously not these new ones. But that report, if you don't have it pinned up onto your wall in the airport division there, you might want to look at it again to see the recommendations that were in there about which of the hangars might be good prospects for such heating systems.
Yeah, we familiar. Thank you, Senator Pershlik.
Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I just want to make reference, and I can't find it. We were sent a letter, written testimony from a gentleman regarding the Middlebury airport and the hangars. Does someone have that letter? And I know Jeannie, I think, forwarded it.
Yeah. See if I got it.
I don't recall any of this, so I'd love to know more.
Oh, hold on, I'll have it in a second.
Oh, it's posted on the website. Looks like Jeannie put it in our materials.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Sambrook's request, I think, is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah.
He didn't ask to testify, but he submitted written testimony expressing his concern about the agency's interpretation of this bill, and particularly as it related to this initiative.
Would you like me to screen share that?
Yes, I guess maybe it's a good idea.
Chair Mazza, may I ask if Dan has seen this before?
Sure, go ahead.
So is this on your radar at all, gentlemen?
So I don't know if I've seen this letter, but we have been in communication with Mr. Sambrook.
Any general comments on
can
this concern?
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make you aware of the testimony. I mean, it's obviously written testimony. He did not ask to testify in person regarding the S-162. And you're right. It does not describe the master permitting, as you were saying. It was much broader. What you're saying is what you were doing with this hangar project is just one of the potential initiatives that would come under this broader master permitting authority.
Yeah, this was something, we had many conversations between Agency of Commerce, Community Development about how they saw the need, to get sort of to the goal of H-162 of, adding business and growing Vermont. So this is just using state-owned infrastructure to meet the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a lot to digest there, so we'll have to-
I guess what are we limiting? I guess that's one of the questions about further limiting. Okay, so the issue. All right, so I guess it's basically a difference of opinion in terms of the project that you've
Well,
selected.
why don't we review it, and we'll have Dan back at another time and continue our discussion. This is a big area, and it's a lot of discussion to be had. So I know something has to be done with the airports. I've always felt that unless we do something, we ought to sell them, but maybe this is the answer.
I know a good realtor up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, he'll buy it. He's got the car wash. He's got the car sales and service.
They're all for sale.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
All right. I think that's we've got to run.
All right. Well, I just wanted to raise it. I think we had a responsibility of recognizing that we'd received it. I think the agency has, needs an opportunity to respond. I think the testimony, as I understood it from Dan, is recognizing that this is only one initiative within that umbrella of using state infrastructure in ways to support economic development. It's and so I don't think the argument was this is the only initiative. It's just, and there could be a variety, whether we're talking about other state-owned properties or whatever. So
Dan, feel free to come back anytime you want to update us. I think you're on the right track. So it's it's a lot to go over, but anytime you have more information or want to discuss it with us in the future, just give us a holler and we'll be glad to take you and Steve back.
Great. Thank you, Senator Mazza.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next agenda item this morning. It's S-231, act relating to excess motor vehicle noise. Senator Perchlik, is that one of you're the lead on this, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on the bill. I'm not a sponsor of the bill, but yeah. And so I reached out to Les Blomberg, who's here with us, who's the director of the Noise Pollution Clearinghouse, which is based in beautiful Montpelier, Vermont.
Why don't you go ahead and lead off the questions, or if you want to go ahead.
I asked Les to come in and talk about, he works on noise pollution issues with all sorts of things around the country. And so he has good background on kind of, why we might care about this, one, and then two, what other states are doing. We heard from Chief Fakos about, local options, just the municipalities passing laws. And, so I just asked Les to look at the bill and see what he thought about it, and, look at our inspection manual and how we deal with mufflers and see if there was anything there. So that's what I thought he could provide for us today.
Good. Good morning, Les. Good morning and welcome to the Senate Transportation Committee.
Morning. Thank you very much for this invitation. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Yeah. Go right ahead. It's an interesting discussion. We had a little bit of discussion on it a week or so ago, but it's a lot more involved than we thought.
Yeah, so basically, just to give you a brief outline of what I think I can offer. I was going to just tell you really briefly about my organization, talk about why traffic noise is important. I have some comments on the language in the bill, and then hopefully can leave some time for some questions. Just
Sure.
very briefly about the Noise Pollution Clearinghouse. The Noise Pollution Clearinghouse is a national nonprofit founded 25 years ago by myself, dealing with noise issues. We're primarily in the area of noise policy. I write noise ordinance and noise regulations for communities across the country. That's one of the main things I do. The other main thing I do is I help individuals who are having noise problems act as a resource library for people who have noise problems. With respect to why noise is important, I was struck last weekend. I was hiking the Robert Frost Trail in Ripton. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this trail. It has Robert Frost poems along the way, and it's a wonderful walk. And I was struck by, I was reading one of his poems, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, which I'm sure you're all familiar with also. And one of the stanzas reads, "He gives his harness bells a shake," referring to his horse, "to ask if there is some mistake. The only sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake." Now that poem was written about 100 years ago. And when I read that poem, the sound was a vehicle noise from nearby highway. Now, what's happened in the last 100 years in Vermont and in the nation is an incredible transformation of our soundscape. The world and Vermont has never been as noisy as it is right now. And we make most of that noise, probably 80%, 90% of that noise, by burning fossil fuels and turning it into CO2, usually in transportation, but also some in manufacturing and stuff. And really, noise has been, for the last 100 years, a byproduct of our consuming fossil fuels. And transportation has been one of the major drivers of noise. So I think of noise as kind of the soundscape of global warming, or the soundtrack of global warming. Noise also has impacted Vermonters in ways that we probably don't even think about. It has actually changed our landscape as well as changing our soundscape. If you think about it, I live in a house that was built in 1900. It is very close to the road, and it has kind of a porch closer to the front. Now we design our houses with a much larger setback, much larger lot size, and a deck facing the back. And that's a transformation in the last 100 years that has really been driven by noise and by roadways. And so, when we think about this, the noise has been shaping Vermont, it's been one of the drivers of sprawl. It's making us redo our architecture and redo the way we live, where we live and how we live. And I think it's important to remember that. Noise also has, traffic noise also has health impacts. Sleep interference is an obvious one, but other ones include, there are cardiovascular effects that have just recently, in the last 20 years, I'd say, been found, including, high links to higher blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, heart attacks. The Harvard School of Public Health has a couple really interesting papers on the increase of heart attacks around transportation sources. And this is all understandable because noise is the stressor. And in the past, excuse me, noise has been used to test stress relieving drugs. And so that is kind of the mechanism for which the cardiovascular effects are occurring. Sorry about that. Noise also, whatever impacts noise have on people, they also have on animals too. We share a lot of the biological architecture. In animals, it kind of picks the winners and losers. Certain species are easier to adapt to our noise than other species. So the other impacts that this has is on property values. I mean, nobody's looking for a nice house in a noisy neighborhood. They're looking for a nice house in a quiet neighborhood. And there's also demand, not really in Vermont yet, but I think it'll be coming for noise walls and sound walls to protect from highway noise, which is, will be eventually a public cost. Moving on to the bill itself. To me, this bill targets the low-hanging fruit of traffic noise. And that is pretty much the intentional noise aspect. That, there's a lot of noise from the tires on the road, there's a lot of noise from the engines, but this bill is targeting intentional noise where people have removed their mufflers and muffling devices. It's an incredibly common thing to do across the country. Almost every state has a similar language. But one of the things that this bill does and could do better is utilize existing federal law. In it is mentioned, and the police chief and AOT testified last week about line 5 or section 5 or provision 5 on page 69 of the inspection manual, and that language is this: any muffler or catalytic converter, this is a reason to reject. Sorry, so you reject a vehicle if any muffler or catalytic converter, if so equipped, is present that is not original factory equipment and not equivalent to replacement equipment, or not designed for highway use. Now, to me, that, I mean, he was specifically, and he specifically mentioned motorcycles having a stamp, and that stamp is required by 40 CFR 205. It's the Code of Federal Regulations. It's a federal regulation promulgated by the EPA back in the mid 80s or early 80s, actually. And this requires that every aftermarket and every original equipment motorcycle muffler has this. Now, I heard you guys, one of you asked AOT, why not other vehicles? Can we do the same thing for cars? And the answer is no, cars do not have this. The EPA was asked to identify major noise sources, and they identified two of them related to transportation, specifically here, trucks and motorcycles. And they actually applied the same standard to both, which was a standard of 80 decibels at 50 feet. And that's actually very loud. A typical car is going to be more like 60 decibels at 50 feet. So the standard is not a very restrictive standard. The European standards are about 10 decibels quieter than the American standards. They've been promulgated more recently by the EU as opposed to a long time ago by the EPA. And that, I think, accounts for the difference in the standards. But so it's not a terribly restrictive standard. It basically limits a motorcycle to be as loud as a semi-tractor trailer. The one recommendation I would have for your bill, however, is that you be more explicit about this. I think when it says, when provision 5 says not designed for highway use, I think that's a direct reference to, for example, the motorcycle mufflers, for which there are some that are stamped competition use only. And so, what I would recommend you adopt is what the state of California has adopted, what numerous cities across the state or country have adopted. I actually helped Boston modify their noise ordinance about 15 years ago to include this provision. I know Denver has it, Boulder has it, a number of smaller cities across the country have this provision too, which is that no person shall park, use, or operate a motor vehicle within, in this case, Vermont, manufactured subsequent to December 31st, 1982, that does not bear the required applicable federal EPA exhaust system label pursuant to the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 40, Volume 24, Part 205, Subparts D and E, which states that the vehicle meets 80 decibels at 50 feet. And, you know, also I would put that provision directly into the inspection manual also. So those would be my recommendations. And yes, I saw a hand. Go for it.
Senator Chittenden.
So I'm generally supportive of updating our inspections for cars so that we don't have aftermarket and devices that are amplifying the noise for all the reasons you outlined. My concern with what you just raised is if we put a decibel reading rather than just a requirement that it not be an aftermarket muffler, is that going to put a burden on all of our inspection stations to invest in sound monitoring? Did California, do they have to now track and record the sound of the cars? Okay, could you tell me more about what California does to measure the sound?
Yes, and this was the original intent of the EPA when they promulgated this rule. They wanted to create an easy enforcement mechanism because they recognized that pulling out a decibel meter is not an easy thing to do necessarily. Number one, it's expensive. It costs, you know, several hundred, $500 probably. Takes a little training, takes time. But so what the EPA, what 40 CFR 205 requires is that every muffler manufactured for a motorcycle, both original equipment and aftermarket equipment, have a stamp on it that is clearly visible. And this is part of the regulation. And that this stamp state that and there are a couple options. One is it could state that it meets the 80 decibels at 50 feet requirement. The other is that it is competition only. What you will find is people who are on the noisiest vehicles are replacing their exhaust system with one that does not have the stamp on it. There are some aftermarket manufacturers out there that are just not putting the stamp on it. And so that is what you're hearing, or they're just putting straight pipes on it that do not have a stamp. California in adopting this was also concerned that when they do this, they usually remove the catalytic converter because it's usually combined. And so California's concern was also that their air emissions due to vehicles without an EPA stamp were higher. So all you look for is the stamp, and it's supposed to be prominent. It's easier, obviously, in an inspection scenario than in the field scenario because an officer may have to get on their hands and knees to get down there to look. But it's still very easy, both in the field and in the inspection scenario.
Question, Senator Kitchell.
Well, this sounds very similar to our discussion with snow machines that made reference to the label. I don't remember exactly, but there was a way of easily determining that because we dealt with the noise and it was referenced. I didn't realize there was something comparable for vehicle exhaust systems. I would think the removal of the catalytic converter would definitely disqualify that vehicle from being inspected. But
that's only on the newest motorcycles, by the way.
Yeah, so is the whatever that label indicating that the equipment conforms to that requirement, which is what we did with the snowmobiles, is that something easily accessible, or do you have to crawl under the, like for law enforcement, would they have to actually crawl under the car to, or is it, I just was wondering how difficult it was to have confirmation, although
they're stealing all the catalytic converters anyway, so there won't be any left.
well, that's kind of true. So I was just wondering in terms of the location of that that label or marking. I don't know exactly. Is it a label? Is it, I don't know, like a VIN number is on a piece of metal strip. So I don't know where. I've never really crawled under my car to look.
Let me clarify. this is not on a car. Because remember I told you that the EPA did not, back in actually in the early 70s, when they started promulgating this rule, they were asked to identify major noise sources, and they did not identify the car itself. I think they were going to get to it, but they did not get around to it.
No, I meant to say on the exhaust system.
So it's on the exhaust system only of the motorcycle, not of cars. And so the requirement in the Code of Federal Regulations is that it is a permanent stamp. So it's usually impressed into the metal.
I guess then I'm confused. I know it's there for motorcycles. You're telling me it's not there for vehicles.
Right, not for cars.
Okay, which is our last understanding, that there wasn't that same kind of identification
Yeah, no, and
that
that's
exists
true.
for motorcycles or for snowmobiles. Thank you.
Question, Senator Pertlick.
Yeah, I didn't see, Les, if you had submitted any written testimony. It would be good if you have this written up so we could get all the details of
I
the.
can definitely do that. I missed your 24-hour deadline, so I didn't do that, but I can definitely send this in so that you can have all the language and all the references.
Yeah, because you have Jeannie's email, right?
I do.
Yeah, so if you send it to her, then we would all get it. That'd be great.
Yep.
Yes, Senator Chittenden. Yes.
I don't know if this is necessarily towards Les, but on this topic, I recall hearing that we streamlined our inspection standards to only focus on safety issues and to take, so maybe it's a question to Les, but do you see an argument that there is, besides just quality of life and noise, is there some stretch to say that louder mufflers are less safe, or is there any case law for that?
Sure. Yes. No. There's a lot of evidence that noise is a danger from highways, and that has to do with a couple different things. One is mostly it has to do with masking of other noises, and the two important sounds that are masked are one, emergency vehicle siren sounds, and two, the noise of a noisy source in the environment, increasing the general background, will mask the sound of other motor vehicles so that a pedestrian cannot hear another car. So basically, what we look at when we want to, for example, this has been an issue with the introduction of electric cars, which are much quieter, especially at lower speeds. There's been some thought of adding noise to electric vehicles. From an acoustician's standpoint, what you want to do is you want all vehicles to be the exact same loudness, because they all contribute to masking each other. And so the optimal distance, the greatest distance of hearing a vehicle is when all the vehicles are the same level. And so the first thing you should do is try to bring all the noisy ones down, because they contribute to the masking of the quiet of a vehicle more than any other. And so this has been a great concern for children and for people who are blind, particularly, because they depend on those signals. As a bicyclist, it's also a concern that I share a lot, because I do a lot of cycling and I'm always trying to hear the vehicles behind me. And one noisy vehicle, maybe not even coming at me, but maybe from behind, but maybe in the other lane, maybe half a mile or half a block away, might be masking the sound of a quieter vehicle beside me. So there are, I think, both, there are safety concerns also.
Okay, questions?
It sounds, oh, go ahead, Senator Pertlick.
Okay, thanks, Russ. I was just going to say, on the inspection manual, you had looked at that, and I remember Tony Faco saying something about how we had it was different for motorcycles and vehicles. I think Senator Chittenden had asked him about this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, is there a fix to make it the same, or is that just a question about the stamp?
No, it's a question about the stamp. The reason they're different is because of the stamp. And so there isn't an easy fix. With respect to cars, your options would be to use a decibel meter, use a subjective analysis of just listening to it, because some of them are just clearly louder than original. And so, you know, you could still do that. And then, but other than that, no.
Okay.
Yes, Senator Ingles. Go ahead.
It sounds like there is no easy fix. I think you just said it perfectly, Les. There is no easy fix without changing the whole standards of who supplies parts to automobiles. There's no standard as far as on what the car has, other than if you get as close to using factory parts. This is something that I
Should be on
don't
a
see it
federal level.
changing.
No.
I mean, it's just until the industry changes
Right.
and puts a stamp on the parts that they send, we have no way of legislating that. We have no way unless we mandate that every inspection station does carry a decibel meter and they rev it up to so many RPMs, or I see a slippery slope.
Yeah, no, I
What's
think you're right that when it comes to automobiles, it is harder. I don't think it's impossible, but it is harder. But with respect to motorcycles, it's very.
But it's beyond this committee, though. I mean, I think it is. I mean, there's nothing beyond us, but it's beyond us to change the whole industry to comply with one complaint that we had with somebody that submitted a bill. In my opinion,
with respect to motorcycles, it's really just adopting a federal regulation and a requirement that already exists in federal law, and just adopting it in the state. That's really the only thing that, with respect to motorcycles, that you would be doing. And, you know, the language in there is similar to what is used everywhere. It is not uncommon for states to do this.
and I do hear about motorcycles and all that, and maybe it's missed my narrow scope of how I read the bill, but it seemed like it was more, this bill was more aimed at cars and trucks than it was of anything else. And when we don't have a federal stamp standard tag on the vehicle, tag on the aftermarket part, or even on the original OEM part, it just seems like it might be a little bit more broader than what the industry is ready to do right now.
Good discussion to have. It's a very, very involved discussion.
If I may, Chair Mazza.
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So Senator Ingles, the only place where I'm still open to this conversation is what I recall from Tony Fakos' conversation that we have a standard for inspection for motorcycles, but we don't for cars. And I'm a city councilor for 7 years. One thing I hear the most about are concerns about noise. So when their neighbors are noise, or when I hear engine brakes on highways, I get the calls and the emails from citizens. I have not heard that many about just excessively loud vehicles. So maybe this is not really a problem. It's just one area where there's one kid that tweaked their muffler, and we just need to have a directed conversation. So I guess I'd like to know if this is a broader problem across the whole state with people tweaking their mufflers, or if this really could be resolved with some just focused interactions with our local offices. But
And I hear you, Senator Chittenden, and I agree. But to act on a bill without a lot more testimony than what we've had, to me, is just writing a law to appease something that is not solving a problem and not giving its due diligence to make sure that we get it right.
Questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Les, for all the input this morning. It's very helpful. It's a good discussion to have, because I don't think it's going to go away, but we can't resolve it in one day, but it's something that's going to be around. And maybe it's something we can get more information in the future. So thanks again for helping us this morning. I appreciate that.
All right, you're welcome. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else this morning? I think we got a few minutes before we go on our joint session.